Good morning. Welcome to Franconia Community Church. Service will start in
You had to go to shows and.
Yeah. Some of it's fun.
Yeah. No.
That's why I stopped going to, we used to go to general synergy to sell jewelry for its help. It got so at the end, we not only did we not really make any money, we you know, I just look at myself. No people know anything, and I'm boxing it all up, and then I have to haul it.
I know, it's pain.
Yeah. Get it out of there.
We used to go to bridal shows. And it was such a thing.
Yeah.
Everybody's got the same stuff.
It just, we finally decided, we basically decided we were too old for this. And it was fun, you know, because we meet people that. Even that, I think, yeah, you know, 20 years after you've done something, you know, there's no one there, it's kind of like coming back to the 30 years after being there. It's not the same. Nobody's there. I went to Carol, funeral yesterday.
Not so space.
I probably find people.
This world, what is it, this world keeps on turning or something, this song, the world keeps on turning.
Yeah.
You want to stay strong.
The ones that didn't work, I took out. Oh, so. So if you want to try it. But are you sure that it isn't mine? No, it was.
Okay, do you want a headset? Hi, Linda.
We tried it
You
again.
want a headset?
And Leilani was here last week.
Yeah, okay. I can hear you too.
What'd you say?
Are you gonna try it?
Would you want me to, or what?
You're fine with it.
I'm fine.
Oh, you.
But thank you.
Thank you, Susan, for that beautiful prelude. Welcome to the Franconian Church of Christ. We're so happy to have each and every one of you here. It's a beautiful, sparkling day, and to take your time for reflection is very positive for all of us and the people around us. Are there any welcomings or announcements by anybody?
I just want to talk about the book study that started last week. We had it at 10:30 to kind of accommodate most of the people. We're going to go back to 1 o'clock on Monday. Tuesday, sorry. Tuesday, and we'll be doing the second chapter. If you weren't here for the first chapter, we can do a quick review of that before we start on the second one. But we hope to see everybody there. Thanks.
Thank you for doing that. I just have an announcement that our family has led an avalanche safety foundation for 7 years now since the passing of our son in an avalanche, and we're having a webinar online avalanche education session on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. And this is available free to anybody. If you have any friends who go out in the snow, enjoy the snow, eventually they'll find themselves in deep snow, unpacked snow, and it's very important. This education is very important, and all you need to do is go to brassavalanche.org, BRASS, that's our foundation, Grace Ronnie Athlete Snow Safety, brassfoundation.org, and sign up for this webinar. And it takes only an hour to be educated. So, other than that, any other announcements?
Are you gonna do that?
We're doing the deacons are putting together an old-fashioned Christmas on December 12th at the pavilion on out here for the community. There's going to be decorating sugar cookies, making old-fashioned ornaments, decorating the tree, a little bit of caroling. Paul is looking into getting a horse and buggy ride. The Historical Museum is doing something as well, so try to shuttle people back and forth. So we need volunteers for bodies to help us with the different activities, and donations of sugar cookies, non-decorated, would be greatly appreciated.
the Historical Society is going to have Santa on their sleigh from 1 to 2. So they're going to dovetail it with our activities that are from 2 to 2 on, probably 2 to 4. So it should be a fun day for the townspeople and the children especially.
And what date again?
Really exciting.
December 12th, it's a
Sunday
Sunday.
the 12th.
2 to 4?
At the Pavilion,
Yeah, the
1 to 2 at the Historical Society. And she'll also have cookies and cider there.
Great. We'll read the call of worship now in unison. Come, speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others, even to the dull and ignorant. They too have their story. Whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt that in yours is unfolding as it should. Therefore, be at peace with God. We'll now sing the chalice out of the red hymnal chalice, 595, Be Thou My Vision. We read together in unison the summary of the law.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. This is the great and first commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets.
Now may we read together our prayer of confession. We are
quick to proclaim our faith, but slow to live the teachings of the prophets. We haste to judge one another, but do not always stand up for justice for all living beings, including the plants and animals. We do not try to better ourselves. We will try to do better so our world can come closer to the place where we want to live. In small and large ways, we are overwhelmed by all we cannot and do not do.
endurance apart, we can also read together. We
No,
know
we are not perfect. We will strive to live in full consciousness
and to
act with understanding. We will give what we can to strengthen our spirits, that of our fellow beings and our church. We will stretch for high ideals, for together we can make this world ever still more beautiful.
No, we'll pass the peace if we can just stand up and make eye contact with people, peace sign, wave. It's a very antiseptic passing the peace. We're and now we'll sing. Oh no! Now we're having Creator Me. We'll read together the prayer list, and these are the prayers for the people, the friends and families of those who recently passed away. Jeffrey Brown, Valerie Adam, Ted Carnegie, William Jeffco. And we pray for these people in need this week.
Lena Anderson,
Rita Farrell,
Phyllis Cole, Chuck Lukaski, Wendy Jeffco, Ken Ford, Harry Chadwick, Don and Tom Monroe, Caitlin Wilson and baby girl Addison Jennings, Susan Strong, and Herbert Luce.
And now is our time to express our joys and concerns that are current in our lives. And may we follow it with Lord, hear our prayer.
Lord, prayers for my friend Nancy, whose in-laws aren't doing very well, and they still have home help come in, but they still have not time to go pick him up and get him in his chair.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Well, I'd like to remember the family of Carol Young. Gary Young, of course, always played his guitar down for Wednesday supper, and Carol was there with him, and I know she'll be greatly missed.
Lord, hear our prayer.
I have a joy. It's a real joy. My daughter was engaged almost 4 years ago now, and they have refused to set a wedding date, but she called me last night, and we had to. It's awesome. So I'm very, very happy that finally it's going to happen.
Don't worry, it took 9 years for Michelle and Scott. Lord, hear our prayer.
Leilani was very excited to get her first vaccine on Friday. She came running in the house, I'm a vaccinated kid! So she's had little to no side effects, and I think she's ready for round 2 in a few weeks. So I'm very grateful that 5 to 12-year-olds are now getting shots.
Yes.
Lord,
hear our prayer. I'll just give one little joy. My little Sophia, my granddaughter, and Precious, sleeping a lot right now. I've only seen her with her eyes open once. I know that'll change. But I am very, very grateful
grateful that I live in Louisville right now. My apartment building. Somebody said that to me the other day. I said, oh, that is awesome. My whole family, my kids, my grandkids, everybody just right around the corner and then out the doors, and I'm
And
very,
she's
very
beautiful.
Oh yeah, all babies are beautiful.
Oh, we're so happy for you and for your family.
Thank you.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Bill?
I'd like to ask you all to keep Honduras hope in your prayers. We have been now 2 years pretty much going through COVID, making it difficult to meet and difficult to monitor things that are happening. There are lots of exciting things that are happening in Honduras. And this afternoon we have our first board meeting in a long time. And there's great energy for that as well. So I think it's hard on all organizations that depend on relationships when you have a situation like COVID where relationships become very problematic and difficult. So keep us all in your prayers.
Lord, hear our prayers.
I want to say that I really appreciate the work that's been done in this building. One of my friends, longtime resident here, came over last night and she said she really thinks the church looks wonderful, really buttoned up, and the new paint job, it gives me joy every time I go by. And now we have the garden shed, and thank you, John, for your work and everybody's contribution to keeping our building going.
Lord, hear our prayer.
And now please take a moment to privately and silently vocalize your thoughts that have not been expressed here. Now let's read together the Maori version of the Lord's Prayer.
Earthmaker, life-giver, pain-bearer, source of all that is and all that shall be, Father and Mother of us all, loving God in whom is heaven, may the hallowing of your name echo through the universe. May your heavenly will be done by all creatures great and small. And may your commonwealth of peace and freedom sustain our hope and calm our mirth. With the bread we need this day, feed us. For with hurt we inflict on another, forgive us. Through times of temptation, strengthen us. From trials too great to endure, spare us. From the grip of all that is evil, free us. For your reign and the glory of the power of his love. Amen.
And now we'll take the offering, and Robert will play on the recorder, Simple Gifts.
This is a story that is quite familiar to everyone, the story of the Good Samaritan. Jesus said to a lawyer asking about eternal life, "You shall love the Lord God with all your heart, with all your strength, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." A lawyer, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied with a story. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise, a Levite who saw him and passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where the man was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. The Samaritan went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own breast and carried him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day the Samaritan took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will pay you back." Which of these 3 do you think proved a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? The lawyer said, "The one who showed mercy on him." And Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." Here ends the reading.
Now we'll sing from the chalice number 609, "Take My Life."
Shall we
Well, here we are again at the time when we reflect on our church community. And this is a Good Samaritan story. It's a really good entree into the discussion and thought about how we are giving back to our world. In this story, the Good Samaritan from Luke, and Jesus was describing the importance of loving both God and neighbor. Challenged to define what a good neighbor is, Jesus told this famous parable to a man traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho, and I researched it. It's 17 miles, and it drops 3,500 feet, so it was quite a steep hike, and it also was through rough desert. It was known as the Way of Blood because of all the robbers there. And the day before Martin Luther King was assassinated, he described his path as the Way of Blood. This man was waylaid by thugs who thrashed him and left him for dead. Afterward, a priest and a Levite, who is a Jewish male who comes from the tribe of Levi by paternal descent, basically synonymous with local royalty. These two men came down the same road. They each ignored the victim, presumably to remain in a state of ritual purity so they could serve in the temple. The Samaritan, who belonged to the ethnic religious group from Samaria and were considered deviants from the Jews, came down the same road. He found the injured man, assisted him, and gave him refuge in an inn, even paying for his stay. And Jesus ends his story, "Go, do likewise." Two things of note here. One, first, the road to Jerusalem, from Jerusalem to Jericho, was infested with bandits. So only an idiot would travel it unarmed and alone. But, as the Desiderata says that we read earlier, even he probably had his story, which was worth listening to. More significant is the fact that the Jews of Jesus did not particularly like the Samaritans, and the feeling was mutual. To speak of a good Samaritan had shock value to the first century listeners, much like a modern telling of a modern parable about a good rioter or a good tax cheat. Samaritans were not very popular. So let's find within ourselves the strength to support this wonderful historic building and our spiritual group as we're reassured of our path and that we are doing the right thing. Each day, as bad news in the world overwhelms us, we need respite, and we need to have a place which reminds us, as the Samaritan did for us, that there is good. It's up to each of us to generate more good in our worlds, in the outside world, from what we receive here. I've read the Desiderata, the pieces of the Desiderata, which was written by Max Ehrman in the 1920s, which became popular in the 1960s as an anthem for the liberal movement. Emerging out of the post-war era when the world was more regimented and centered around what was essential, these loving words helped lead so many of us to a higher consciousness. The word desiderata is plural Latin word for desideratum, which is a thing we yearn for. The implication here is that these are desired qualities for the soul and the heart. Let these words resonate within you, and let them elevate your sentiments and focus your inner resolve to be more centered and to do better. After I've read this, we will hear testimonials from other members of the church about their own stewardship and feelings about the church. And here's the desiderata. Go placidly amid the noise and haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. As far as possible, without surrender, be on good terms with all persons. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others, even the dull and the ignorant, for they too have their story. Avoid loud and aggressive persons. They are vexations to the spirit. If you compare yourself to others, you may become vain or bitter, for always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself. Enjoy your achievements as well as your plans. Keep interested in your own career, however humble. It is a real possession in the changing fortunes of time. Exercise caution in your business affairs, for the world is full of trickery. Let this not blind you to what virtue there is in many persons who strive for high ideals. And everywhere life is full of heroism. Be yourself. Especially do not feign affection. Neither be cynical about love, for in the face of all aridity and disenchantment, it is as perennial as the grass. Take kindly the counsel of the years, gracefully surrendering the things of youth. Nurture your strength of spirit to shield you in sudden misfortune, but do not distress yourself with dark imaginings. Many fears are born of fatigue and loneliness. Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe. No less than the trees and the stars, you have a right to be here. Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. I just read that. And whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. Therefore, be at peace with God, whatever you conceive him to be. And whatever your labors and aspirations in this noisy confusion of life, keep peace with your soul. For with all the sham and drudgery and broken dreams, this is still a beautiful world. Be cheerful and strive to be happy. So now anybody who wants to come up here and talk about how they view the church community, they're welcome.
Actually, I have kind of testimony to make. This morning, I spent most of the early morning preparing an affidavit for court. And to be honest, I really don't know what an affidavit is, so I don't know whether the lawyer who's going to be presenting this quote affidavit is hopefully she'll like it, and maybe she won't. But the affidavit is about some people that we know, Francis and Henry, and Natalia and Fernando. I first met Francis when she was 16. She's in her 30s now, so I've known her a long time. And the story this morning, biblical story, reminded me of how most of us behave, and certainly how I have behaved over the years with Francis. When I first met Francis, she was literally starving. She was sleeping in the street, and I was in a Chinese restaurant in Europe, and the portions in the Chinese restaurants in Europe are huge. And so I invited her. She was inviting me to something, but I was inviting her to sit down and share this meal. And so that's how I first met her. But once she latched on to me, she wouldn't let go. And every trip, for years and years, she would perch herself, and some of you who've been with me on trips know this, she would perch herself in front of the hotel. And she would persist until I helped her, until I gave her something. And over the years, we tried a number of different things with her. But in Honduras, if you have a disability, which she did because she was shot when she was about 15 by a gang, and she literally couldn't walk. And most of the time that I knew her, her leg was infected, so that not only could she not walk, but she was in very poor health. And in Honduras, your family is supposed to take care of you. Their churches don't reach out to a good Samaritan. Churches basically take care of your soul, but they don't take care of your neighbors. And so for years, Frances got no help from her family, which is normally the way in Honduras you would be aided. But her family was either non-existent or as poor as Frances was. So she had no family. And because she was disabled, the community kind of disavowed her. There are no institutions in Europe or in Honduras for people who are in need to get charitable, in some way, charity to help them or assist them. And so for years, we were the only source of Frances's well-being. And I was like the priest and the Levite. I tried to, if Frances was perched on the front door, I'd go out in front of the hotel. I'd go out the back door because I really didn't want to deal with this. Honduras Hope doesn't help individuals. Honduras Hope helps communities with things like water projects or electrification or what is good for everyone, like the school or education. We don't give handouts to people who are on the street, homeless or whatever their situation. But Frances persisted. She was there every trip. And so over the years, you get to know somebody, right? You get to know them and know about them. And their story becomes in some way your story. And so lo and behold, 2 years ago when I was there, we went by to give Natalia, whose mother had just been murdered, and Natalia witnessed the murder, as did Henry. We went, and so Natalia was living with Frances, and the house that they had was probably, or the apartment was probably the size of this pew area here. And there was no bed for Natalia, so we purchased a bed and took the bed by her house. When we got there, Frances and her family wasn't there, but they were these young men in the house. And so what I didn't know then, but know now, is that this was a gang who were trying to find Frances and Natalia and Henry so that they could kill them, basically. So I left Honduras not knowing what the outcome was with Frances, but then she called. We were there in November this month, and then she called in December wanting help. But of course I wasn't in Honduras able to help her. So basically, I told her to go to a church. And I don't know if she went to a church or not, but the next call that we got was in the first week or two of January, and she was in Mexico on her way to the border. And you all know the story from then on about how the family was separated at the border and how they came together, how they moved to Whitefield, and how they got married here in the church, and how today their kids are doing well in school, And Francis and Henry all have driver's licenses, and they have a car, and they're realizing the American dream, I guess you'd say. But it wasn't always so. And so there are 2 points that I want to try and make here. One of them is that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And it's very important that we realize that people who bother us as we go through the journey of life, most of the time have legitimate concerns and have legitimate needs. And we want to be careful that we're not like the Levite and the priest. And that we, with a better heart than I have displayed over the years in terms of Frances and her family, that we more graciously reach out and help those in need. But persistence is important. And the second thing has to do with community and the church. What sustained me and sustained actually Frances and her family in the long run was the the creation of institutions like the church or like Honduras Hope, who offer consistency and are there yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So it's important, at least in my opinion, that we support and aid and keep alive institutions that are in the, quote, business of caring for others. Because even though you don't know today or know tomorrow who will be on that road to where did the road go to? Samaritan?
It was between Jericho and Jerusalem.
Okay, on the road to Jericho. Even though you may not know who's there, trust me, tomorrow, next month, or next year, the Samaritan will be at your doorstep. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
I'll follow up on that. So when I think about this church and why support the church, there are 3 really good reasons for me. So this church has been in my family for 5 generations. My great-grandmother, Eliza, used to walk from Ridge Road to the church every Sunday. My grandmother used to sing in the choir, and Ruth Taylor had a picture, which I wish I had gotten a copy of, with Ruth as a child and my grandmother and, in the choir. And then my father was a deacon in the church, and he told me the story of how he once had to hire a minister for misuse of drugs, I guess. My aunts went to Honduras, and then as a child, when I was growing up here, I did my Bible study here. I took hikes with Bill, because he was the minister at that time. And I had my first lesson in yoga in the basement as a young girl. And then, as an adult, when I moved back, this is where my children did Bible study. Sometimes I was the teacher, and they both were baptized in this church also. Speaking of baptism, there's also another picture in our family taken on the stairs in the front of the church with all these generations, and the kids were getting baptized that day, my cousins. And so that's one reason I support the church, because I have a lot of connection with my family to this particular church. The second reason is because I think, like Bill, that the church is a very important part of our community. It's one of the institutions that represents the true teachings of Christ, of helping the neighbor, feeding the poor. And we do that in this church. And so I think even though, in our worship service, we may be small in number, we are very mighty in the work that we do. And so for community, I think it's important to keep the church going as an institution. And the third reason I, in particular, support this church has to do with the teachings of the church, of the national UCC. That we're a peace and justice church, we're an open and affirming church, welcoming all people, not condemning someone because of their race, because of their sexuality, because of a disability, that we embrace everyone. And that work is articulated across the country, across the globe, by the United Church of Christ. And so that's the other reason that I really like this church, because on all levels of the church, I support its policies. So I think it's important to tithe, which means to give money on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis, but also, speaking of affidavits, a codicil into our wills can be written by hand while you are in sound body and mind, which will give a lump sum donation to the church, because I would like to think that when we are in the dust, when we are gone, that there will be new generations to take on the work of this church. And I know, we look around and like a lot of congregations, we're all gray-haired or getting that way. But if we can at least see the church through to another generation, it's got a fighting chance of continuing its work, and very important work in the world, in the future generations to come. So,
Thank you. Great.
Okay.
What came to my mind was some of the things that go on at the time that an offering is passed out. And there's sort of a lot of meaning in what words are chosen to do that, or to bless the offering. I often use Bert Rim's old thing, which some of you will remember well. The cattle on 1,000 hills are thine, the hills are thine, and we are thine. We give you but thine own. And that notion that what we're giving here is already God's. There's things of everything is our doxology, everything we have, everything we are, every moment is a blessing from above. That I often say in passing the plates out that Madonna and Karl Marx had it right, that we live in a material world. If you don't know the references, they're shared with you, but we live in a material world, and that our job here, hopefully, is to be bringing this into the world. And so we're sort of, it's sort of a wonderful but fallen world. We're obliged to keep the worldly part of this whole thing going. And that's kind of what this is about. The other thing I've often said is something to the effect about giving, that there's a typical notion of give till it hurts. just keep till it hurts. And I offer the possibility that, no, you could give until you laugh out loud. That you're just putting this stuff in there because it's fun. And a lot of what happens here is that way. I'll be around for years to come.
Just speaking after everyone else, trying to think about, many things you've heard a lot about the work this church does, our outreach to Honduras Hope. We have other, long-term projects that we support, our local projects, the Good Neighbor Food Pantry, our Wednesday suppers, and our events we put on for the community, and Halloween and Christmas and Easter and 4th of July, big events we do. We reach out to the community, we see we look around, it's just a small number of us here that are regularly here, but it's not always the same people we see every day in the pew. So there's probably about twice as many people, maybe a little more, that are actually still actively involved in helping us. And despite that, I think there's a few rumors that some people may be aware of, and may have heard from other people that are not as well connected to the church as we are. And one of them is that our church is just running out of money. The endowment has been going down, everything's being spent, and we're going to run out of money. And so people say, why should I bother supporting the church? It's not going to be a thing long. And then on the other hand, some different people say, oh, that church has tons of money, they've got a huge endowment, and they don't need my money. But I think the reality is, if we want to keep these things going, and we don't want the endowment to disappear, we want it to maintain the way it is or even grow, we do need our money. And we put in, all of us contribute what we can, and then the church can continue to thrive. And that's not just the money that we tend to think about when we talk about stewardship, but it's also other kinds of work and our volunteering efforts. Even if this church had tons of money, it wouldn't work if it weren't for people doing things. We have people, the trustees have been working on maintaining the building, the deacons have been working on maintaining our services and our outreach to the community, and the mission board has been working on maintaining our outreach to those people that are in need, those that are hungry in our community, need to come get a bag of food or a hot meal. And we need all of that, not just the money, but also all the volunteers that it takes to run all of the things that we do. And we also need new ideas coming in. And I think recently, one of the things we've seen relatively recently was the idea of, we had a couple new people, and Sandy and Tracy came in and said, we have this idea, we like to put on a hot meal every week. And a lot of the ideas we've heard about are things that people say that they want the church to do. And this was a little different because that was something that they wanted to do for the church. And we need more of that. We need people to come up with ideas of things that they could do for the church. And, then you have new things going on. It's like, before it was happening, none of us had really thought about what a great idea that was. So, hopefully, I can inspire some giving, whether it's through money or volunteering or new ideas. Amen.
Thank you, brother.
Anybody else like to chime in and have their own thoughts about what the effect of the church is on them and how it supports them? Okay.
Let's move on to our final hymn, which is 612. Thank you for all your wonderful finances.
Go placidly amid the noise and haste. Live as the Samaritan did, with a clear conscience, doing good deeds whenever possible, and exercise your generosity of heart.
Thank you, Susan. That was beautiful.
It sounds like
How you doing, Bill? So you've been living in another house. How are things going? Oh, he's lying. Yeah. Bringing that mouse.
We have done that.
How are you?
That last one was just. Okay.
Some of that program.
Went down, I had my